Hi, everybody. Welcome to Black Women's Equal Pay Day. My name is Minda Harts, and I'm joined by Natalie, the founder and creator of the Factuality Game. Hi, Natalie. How are you?
I am good. I'm a little tired, but I am good. Excited for the conversation. I'm never too tired to talk about equal pay.
Yes, exactly. For those who are watching, we're streaming live on YouTube and we're streaming live on LinkedIn Live. We just finished not too long ago a session. Natalie, talk a little bit about what we just came out of, and then this is called Keep the Conversation Going.
So first, I want to say that Minda and I decided that we would partner on a factuality session because obviously, with the memo and helping women of color secure the seat, we're also talking about securing the bag as well. And so it only made sense for us to collaborate and talk through how we could join forces and have a factuality session that really highlighted equal pay day for Black women. That's why we had the session today. That session did reach capacity in 21 minutes, which is just unbelievable. And we were able to make a donation of $1,600 to Equal Pay today, which is incredible. And so in the session, we pulled together about 80 people where we had a conversation about structural inequities and also considering what aspects of the structural inequities are leading to a day like today, equal pay. We shouldn't be having days like this. That's ultimately where it led us, is that we actually shouldn't be having these days. There should be equity.
Yes, absolutely. That's the part that I think is so critical. Like, this is not a holiday, right? Let's not be fooled. This is not a holiday. This isn't, we go get the margaritas. You can because you want to be paid more, but this is not a celebration day. This is an awareness day. And one of the things we want to talk about for those people who are not Black women, $62 or 62 cents on a dollar. That's what we make as Black women. And we know that trans women and Indigenous women and Latinx women make less. And so we have to talk about these things. And so, we want to be organic a little bit. So we know that people are going to be chiming in on the chat. So make sure that you definitely ask questions or have any thoughts. But Natalie, why is this day important to you as a Black woman?
Minda, it's so funny when you said celebrating and grabbing the margaritas, like, absolutely not. Maybe when the food is equitable, right? But I found myself on the very first flyer that I put out for our event, I put in honor, and I was like, girl, what are you talking about? Honor, like in acknowledgement. And
Yes.
so I immediately realized I had to do a shift in the language, an acknowledgement of Equal Pay Day, because it's nothing to honor, it's nothing to celebrate, but we have to acknowledge it. And I've never seen so much traction around Equal Pay Day for Black women as I've seen this year, especially and also with Juneteenth. So I'm so excited to be part and alive, and also to be part of this momentum. And so it's just such a frustrating thing to see myself in the data, to know that that has happened to me, that I have been part of that 62 cents, and being in roles where I meet men who are making twice what I'm earning. And I've shared that story, that as an assistant vice president, I've met other assistant vice presidents who are making twice my earnings. I reported into a cabinet with vice presidents with white men who are making six figures with bachelor's degrees, yet I had a master's. And so how do you reconcile this? And it's so frustrating when you secure the seat, but then the money's not following it. That's just really disheartening.
Yeah, it really is. Listening to you, it made me think about a time when I was in my former life, and I had, well, on paper, it looked like a promotion, but it was actually, I was an interim director for a department, and they expected me to do my job, my old job still, and the other person's new job, right? And after like a month, I'm like, you know what? I'm doing the job of three people, and I'm getting the same paycheck. And I thought to myself, this is not okay. When I started digging around and I saw what my predecessor had made, and he was making all kinds of money. Obviously, he wasn't there anymore. And I said to myself, okay, Minda, sometime we got to do a self-talk, right? Like, you're going to have to go and have this conversation about some type of stipend. Something has to happen because you're not going to keep doing these three jobs and killing yourself. And so I did. I forced myself to go have a conversation with my manager at that time. And I said, I'm doing the job of three people, and I'm still expected to do all three great. I said, I'd really like to discuss being compensated to match, to fill the gap of what, Jim was making. And, he's like, oh, I hadn't even considered that. And long story short, it ended up happening, right? But think about it, if I never would have brought it up, he never would have brought it up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It makes me think back into, I like how you said that, my former life, where my introduction to the pay gap, I mean, there's always been a pay gap. And I shared earlier today that I joined this small college community. And although I was wrapping up a master's in race and ethnic studies, although I had transitioned out of 2 diversity related jobs, that I was told I wasn't qualified to be a director, yet my boss had a bachelor's degree, younger than me, started off as an assistant director, got promoted to an assistant dean, and I was told I wasn't qualified. And I started at a title even lower than hers and had my master's 3 months later. And at some point, she left, and I saw the documentation of how much she was being paid. And at that time, I was being paid somewhere in the 30s. That was my introduction. And she was being paid, multiply that for that assistant dean role, but I wasn't qualified with the degree. Make it make sense.
Yeah, that part. I don't want to like bring up an old wound, but let's talk about that feeling, right? How did you feel when you found that? Because we talk about psychological safety in the workplace. That's a form of not being in a safe place to where, and people might say, oh, well, that's racism. That is systemic racism at its finest, right?
It felt disorienting. It felt really disorienting. And that was like when I finally realized that there was racism in the workplace, and that you had to look beyond the gender piece, because there were 2 women telling me I wasn't qualified, and or one telling me I wasn't qualified, and one allowing me to feel I wasn't qualified, having me do the dumbest things like go blow up balloons. Like really, really dumb things having me do. Girl, I have a whole entire master's and you don't, but you're my boss. So it felt really disorienting. And I stayed in that role as a coordinator until my 4th year there. It didn't shift until I had another colleague, Dr. Wanda Montañez, telling me, girl, the same thing is happening to me. So we saw it was something happening to women of color. It just feels like you're outside of yourself watching these awful things happen to you.
Yeah, it is. It's difficult. And, I think that's why it's so important. And half of this is we have to ask, right? But then the other half is companies have to do the right thing,
Yeah.
right? And I really am, whenever I get a chance to say it now, I'm like, companies should be being transparent and doing salary audits and let people know what is what, right? If you care and you want to invest in Black women, show us what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know how you feel about that. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. And I've been in so many spaces. I mean, even, just even thinking a call we had earlier a couple of days back where you were just like, make sure that you are being compensated adequately for your time and your contributions to this field and into this time. And I've been in spaces. I remember I had a facilitation. I was in Arizona, and the host of the event, her name is Nikki. She's Hawaiian, and she got up at the end of my session and she said, if you want to hire Natalie, you are not to negotiate with her. And she said it in front of a whole conference, like, don't negotiate with her. This is her price. You need to respect Black women. I was like, okay, Nikki. And I promise you, I got so many hits and not a single person asked me to bend my price. And so I speak openly about prices when it comes down to it with friends, because I want to make sure that they know that there's something available and that you should ask and max it out and maybe perhaps even play catch up. I mean, goodness, I just thinking how much that you lost, how much you don't have access to because you weren't compensated adequately. And especially for those who are working their 9 to 5s or doing some consulting or a fusion of the two, that make sure that you are getting everything that you are worth. I have a good friend that says, don't leave money on the table.
Yeah, we can't afford to. And what I really want to also, it should fire you up to know that we have all these credentials, all these degrees, all this experience, and we're still being underpaid, right? So we have to do something about it. And you know, the other thing I want to talk about too is the importance, because you mentioned something. We had a conversation just this week about this and the role that we as Black women can play in each other's lives to say, hey girl, hey, and I want to share a story that I was actually another Black woman that I don't even know. She saw that I was up for, it was up for, I put a proposal in for a workshop. And it was, I guess, down to me and this other woman to talk about racism in the workplace and advancing, women and bias and all of these things. And the other woman happened to be a white woman. And she came back to me, and I'm so thankful that she did. She said, Minda, I just want to talk to you about something. And she said, I saw your proposal. It's really good, but I wanted to let you know that there's another woman who is actually asking for X amount of money. And it was significantly more than what I was asking for. Mm-hmm. And she's like, so why don't you tweak some things and then resubmit your proposal?
Yeah.
I just want to, I don't want to like say her name and say the company, but I just want to send so much love to that woman right now, because those are the conversations that we need to have, right? She didn't know me to have to help me, but she saw where she could help me, right? And that changed my life. I then had a conversation with Natalie, and we were talking about it, and we were like vibing off each other, like, yes, ask for more, and ask for the ancestors too, like we have to do that. So I don't know if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, I mean, what it really comes down to is like, who do we have around us, above us, around us that was able to share that type of knowledge with us to allow us to go into these conversations where we already know what to ask for. And that has a lot to do with the representation piece. And, one thing I'm so grounded to saying is the spaces we deem professional. And as you get to the top of that, I like to call it a pyramid, because, it gets smaller as you make your way to the top. And when you get to the top of that pyramid, there goes your representation. And so we're essentially out here kind of flailing at times and trying to figure it out. So it's always so great when somebody extends a rung and allows us to go up there with them. And so I'm happy that she made it into your life, because then you were, I felt like I was on speed dial and you had to pass that along to me, that perhaps we should be reconsidering how we're negotiating and getting this done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to thank everybody, who's watching and telling your stories. We're seeing the comments here, and, and this is important. We got to have these conversations, but I am optimistic because, like you said, Natalie, there was a time, the last couple of years we do talk about Black women's equal pay, but something feels different.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw it in so many places. It's beautiful. And that's, we have to amplify the message and the voices who are spreading these messages, so that we can make a shift. We have to make a shift.
Yeah, we definitely do. And what are your thoughts in terms of, so yes, Black women asking for more, but what about those people who consider themselves allies, right? What is their role in this situation? Like, they can't turn, they're like, oh, I'm not Black, that's not my problem, right? I'm not a Black woman, that's not my problem. But why is this a humanity issue? And it should be their problem too.
Because ultimately it's not taking anything away from those, like the powers that be. Like, those salaries are set, and I'm so tired of the conversations where we don't have it in the budget. You have it in the budget to have popcorn and all these random things at meetings. Put that into my paycheck. How about that? And so I think that for those who do have the ability to make a shift, then let's get all the way into it and start doing it, because in many instances, like I said, the diversity, that representation it's not super diverse at the top. And so it requires the allyship of those at the top to help us get what we deserve. And there are certain organizations that have tiers for pay, but even finding with the tiers that Black women are typically at the lower end even of that tier. And so knowing that it doesn't take anything away from you, but that it can increase and enhance the quality of life of a different group, a marginalized group. And why wouldn't you want to be about this? But I think the part is that it requires you to own privilege. And that's a really challenging thing for a lot of people to do.
Yeah, that is true. And, as you were talking, I was even thinking about something you said when you were running the facilitation earlier this afternoon, that Asian men make a lot of money, or Asian women, but we always center it around what white men and white women make. I would love for you to like spit a little truth into that.
Privilege. I mean, seriously. So when I first pulled the data, when I first came up with the idea for Factuality and I pulled that bureau data, that was a 2014 fact sheet. And I saw that Asian men had the highest income, and immediately I was sold. I'm like, I'm building this out. I don't know what it's going to become, because I was so blown away by that hidden fact. We routinely benchmark against white male dollars, but Asian men have been outpacing it. And I'm just going to take a quick couple of seconds just to say that you have to dive into the ethnic piece, especially for Asians, because saying it as the highest income, I noticed even for some Asian participants, it's such a diverse group that it can present as misleading, but also understanding the privilege there and wanting to see your own story, exactly how it fits your life. When this is a simulation of racial disparities. And so that piece right there, but blown away by the fact that we don't even acknowledge that Asian Americans, when you factor in the whole entire racial group, have the highest income. And so I always tell participants, be a little bit curious about why we have a tendency to center whiteness. It's the privilege piece. Most
Yeah.
people are so surprised to learn that Asian Americans have the highest income. We just make an assumption that it's white Americans, but at least since I pulled the data for 2014, it's been constant since then.
Yeah, I really appreciate that piece of information in your facilitation. And for those who may not have been with us, talk a little bit about what just transpired, what that facilitation looks like, so in case people want to hire you for that.
So it's just an incredible way. It's a fusion of fact sharing and storytelling and experiential learning, and it's grounded in facts, but it does lend itself to a little bit of role playing, if you will. And it's all grounded in data and allows people to engage in this simulation of structural inequities, but it's exclusively from credible data sources. So we have the FBI, we have Census, NAACP. So it's all very credible, NIH, National Institutes of Health. And so it's a really, so it's an easier way, a more palatable way to dive into a really uncomfortable conversation. And I have practitioners who tell me that they've been doing this for like 20 years and that it is the best thing that they've ever, or the best approach to having a meaningful conversation. And so in our group, we had about 80 people, and there's one participant, Minda, I just have to call out, Paul, who said that it's time to grab the crowbar to break down these barriers to help other white people see that these are the facts. And I bring up Paul because I had to pause when he said that, but I also noticed that, especially for white participants who might struggle with having this conversation, who might be the ones that have a tendency to opt out, that they are some of the most vulnerable in this space. It creates a lot of comfort because no one's being implicated, no one's being or left to feel bad. It's just more so letting you know who is implicated, which makes it an easier way to digest what is fact.
Yep, that's so true. And I really did like that when he said that. I hadn't heard it put that way. We have so many comments in the chat. The amens, but then the me too's, and we have a couple questions, a lot, but I'm just gonna put out a couple of them, and if there's something that resonates with you that you might want to answer, and then I can chime in too. We have nearly every woman in my job is being severely underpaid. How do I, as the only Black woman, advocate for higher pay when other groups who have the privilege don't speak or leverage it?
There's power in the numbers, and so it's just trying to figure out how you can get the other people on board, because I know for a fact that the messages that come out of my Black body will fall on deaf ears. I need other people to amplify my voice, and so it's that collective voice that's really going to give you some momentum. That's what I would say. Do you have any thoughts about that too, Minda?
Yeah, I think I do agree with that. And I think we're at a very unique time in our careers as Black people in particular, that so many companies are making commitments to what they want to do for us and how they want to invest in us. And so this is your opportunity to say, actually, based off of what you said last month, I actually have some ideas of how we could address that.
Yeah.
I really want to be solution based, and I think that doing a pay audit would really shine a light on how we can make sure that parity for all women, for all people, and and we'll put that back on them. So this is the way that before we didn't have that to go to, right? We're just being troublemakers. We're just shaking the room, but this is actually what you said. And then also to Natalie's point, having other people who you can leverage, right? So if you do think that there is someone in your organization who seems like they might be down for the cause right now, talk to them about it and say, hey, what do you think about this? I'd love for you to talk about this too. And so that's like the part of all of this, right? Like Black people, Black women, we can't be the only ones talking about this. Like, there has to be something that others see that this is an issue too, right? Even in our country right now, regardless if you are a Republican or a Democrat or a Green Party or Libertarian, there's something on the line right now.
Yeah.
And you have some decisions to make, right? And it can't be, oh, it's just their problem. This is a humanity issue. And so we have to really look at these, the wealth gap, we have to look at reform issues, legal issues, all of the things, and say, how do we make this country work for everybody? And at the heart of it, I hope that everybody would want that, you know?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Natalie, what do you think we're not talking about when it comes to pay equity or equity for women of color?
I'm
Black
sorry.
women?
Bring me back to that.
What do you think is missing from this? Is there anything that's missing from this conversation? Do you think that there's something that we're not focusing on when we do talk about Black women's equal pay? That maybe we should be? I don't know.
Yeah. If we're talking about it, then we need to be about it too. That's what's missing. We can't just have the conversation and then not pad those pockets. That's the most glaring thing that's missing. It's just the money that accommodates the conversation.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see it. Has anybody received an email from your company that said, we're going to do better? Today is Black Women's Equal Pay Day. We want to make sure that we're doing right by. I'm just curious if anybody's company is highlighting that day, other than like a media company. I'm just curious. But yeah, we all have to be about it, and it can't just be us. And I don't want to hear. I know what I don't want to hear anymore is just work harder and be patient.
Yeah.
Yeah. That part. Let's see if we take. Someone said EEOC. Yeah. Sometimes you gotta.
Yes, that's what it's there for.
Sometimes you gotta flex that muscle, and you know, and that's a part too. I mean, I think part of this, you know, we're joking about it, but also knowing your state's equal pay laws, right? Those are the things that you can also gather when you need to have these conversations, and then again, asking people, right? You know, people like to talk. You build relationships with people, you're gonna find out who's making what and who isn't. I remember on my first corporate job, I found out that everybody was getting paid differently doing the same job when we were at lunch, right? And when people are lunching and venting and talking, you learn quite a bit, you know. Someone said, I sent out an email about it. Yes. I like it. But yeah, no, I just appreciate, you know, all of you being here with us today. We'll finish with some final thoughts. Natalie, I'll let you go, and then we'll even if it's not about Black Women's Equal Pay Day, but just, you know, some information, some advice, some motivation, whatever you think is appropriate.
Sure. So it's a fusion of all the above, but I sadly, you know, the memo wasn't available to me when I came to this realization that I wasn't receiving equal pay, alongside encountering daily racism and bullying and a lot of awful things that happened to me in the workplace, which is the reason why I decided to pursue Factuality full time. So that is my full time work. And when I put out price points and I have people trying to negotiate, it's like, it feels like it's happening to me all over again, where it's like, I know my worth and I need you to see it as well. And I'm not going to shift. I'm not going to budge because this is what I deserve. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want the workplace to be absent of Black women if they aren't receiving equal pay. And so I'm so glad that this is being amplified today. And I hope that it catches the attention of the right people so that we can keep more Black women in the workforce, so that there could be more representation and people that look up to us to want to, or who can see themselves in these roles, because there are other people who are already there. But you have to create some equity. You have to create some harmony if we're going to ever achieve that.
Yeah. I love that. And it's so important. I think that it's the reason why I wrote the memo, because I know that racism kills careers, right? And systemic racism kills a lot of Black and brown careers. And we've worked too hard to have that happen. And so we really need to have environments that are welcoming to us, that are going to pay us, that are going to see us, that are going to promote us. Because many of us didn't leave our traditional workforce because we didn't like the job that we did. At least for me,
Yes.
I loved my job, but it was the system, it was the people, it was the toxic environment that it suffocated me.
Yeah.
And I don't want that for the next generation, but I do. There's some things that have to change, and we're gonna have to dismantle this system of oppression, because not everybody experiences it, and there's a certain group in this country that always feel that pressure, and we have to do something about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. So where can people find you, Natalie? Just round things out.
Yeah, so please visit factualitythegame.com. Hit that contact page. Or actually, go to the homepage. It's nice, and it also shows the highlights of the program. There's a reviews page that captures authentic feedback, and then if that is of interest to you, definitely hop over to the contact form. I'd love to hear from you and talk about how we can have a really helpful conversation, engage your folks in meaningful dialogue around structural inequities.
Yes, and I approve that message. Please contact her, and you need this. You need this because oftentimes, as people of color, we're doing the heavy lifting. And I'm not saying make Natalie do the heavy lifting, but hire her so she can come and make your job a little easier, and educate people, because that's what needs to happen. As for me, people always say, how can I support you? The Memo paperback comes out November 15th. I have 2 new chapters, and I actually have some scripts in this one because I realized that sometimes we don't have the language to actually say what it is we need to say. And so I wanted to be able to be an extra piece of thoughtfulness in this next one. So if you have not ordered the Memo itself, go for the paperback. But if you like the Memo, then order the paperback for somebody that you wish you would have had, and they need that extra gift, because we're in this together. You can find me at mindaharts.com. We're all on these internet and LinkedIn streets, so make sure that you support us, support others, amplify the work, know that you are more than enough. And I host LinkedIn Lives on Monday at noon, so we'll see you there. And again, this isn't a celebration. This is, we're acknowledging it, and we're gonna hold companies accountable. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.